Okay, I think everybody understood that when I send out a broadcast with a switch, unless I have VLANs, the broadcast is forwarded. All right? So when I have the ARP request, it's going to flood it out of all the ports. All the ports now with a VLAN, it's going to forward it out of all the ports that belong to that particular VLAN. So now ports 1 through 4 that belong to team 1 will receive this broadcast. What about payroll or team 3 or team 4? Will they see this broadcast? No. They will not see it. So when I sniff your network, am I able to sniff your traffic? Not unless you're in my VLAN. You cannot sniff my traffic. On a hub, can I? Absolutely. We know this, right? Because we can put a Wireshark, connect to it, I can sniff all your network. Can I do it on a switch? Certainly you can do it on a switch because we have VLAN flooding and MAC flooding and a lot of that we'll talk about later. But just at a basic level, this is one measure. Okay, so with VLANs, the VLAN 1 is there by default. All of the ports, if this switch is out of the box, all the ports on your switch belong to VLAN 1. Okay? So by default, you have a VLAN 1, and all of your ports belong inside of that VLAN 1. So VLAN 1, if you have a 24-port switch, will have 24 ports, right? So what do? If I want to create a VLAN, then I create a VLAN first. Then I assign ports to VLANs. Okay, so here, when I created the subnet, these guys cannot talk to each other because they are in different networks. When I put you in your own subnet and you in your own subnet, now you're two different networks. And we know two different networks cannot talk, right? Because in order for you to talk, you have to belong to the same network. What do I need? I need that layer 3 device. So it's important that you understand or recall that a switch is a layer 2 device. It cannot forward by IP. So unless I have a layer 3 device, I'm not going anywhere. So what are we saying? On a switch, what you have is a CAM table. That's the Content Access Module table. And in this CAM table, you have port numbers and MAC addresses. These MAC addresses are the MAC addresses of the source host. Does that make sense? Great. So what I'm doing with my VLAN here is, notice, I have put port 1 in VLAN 10 and 4 and 20 and so on. I've created the broadcast domains. And each of those VLANs then can communicate if I add my next layer device. Now, ports on the same VLAN share the same broadcast. When you were walking in and working with physical devices, I had VLANs up here for you. And I said, if you want your host to communicate, make sure that there are ports 1 through 6 for VLAN 1, ports 7 through 12 on VLAN 2, and so on, right? So that's what we were talking about. So how do I configure VLANs? Statically and dynamically. Most often we create our VLANs statically. I could do it dynamically by allowing certain MAC addresses or making certain MAC addresses part of a particular VLAN. So the minute you connected your laptop or your computer to my switch, it knows, oh, your MAC address is such and such, you are part of this VLAN. That's how we assign them dynamically. So, first, I guess let's show you how to create a VLAN. On your switch, you simply move to Global Config. Here you type in one way of creating a VLAN. I just created a VLAN 10 and named it Sales. Sometimes, though, it won't allow you to create it from here, and you have to go inside of what we call a VLAN database. In this case, now remember, you can either do it this way, depending on iOS, or if it doesn't allow you to create it there, you need to go inside a VLAN database and then do the same thing. VLAN to marketing. This is how I create my VLANs. The way to see what VLANs I've created is simply show VLAN. This will give me the list of VLANs on my switch. Once I'm done, I then decide, are my ports on my switch access ports or trunk ports? Access ports are ports that connect the user to that particular port. A trunk port is used to link you up to the next device. Okay, so what does that mean? If I make a port trunk, I'm allowing multiple VLANs to get on that road, on that port. Are we good? Trunk port means VLAN 1, VLAN 2, and 3 can get on that port. If it's an access port, only the VLAN that that port belongs to can get on that. Very good. Trunk ports allow me to connect to uplink to various devices so that I allow multiple VLANs to traverse it. So, once I have decided, port number 9 needs to be a member of VLAN 10, that means it's an access port because it's going to Jeremy. And so Jeremy is connected to port 9. I want Jeremy to be part of VLAN 10. I go, okay. Interface FA09, switch port, access VLAN 10. Now I just put his port in VLAN 10. So if VLAN 10 was named row 1, he's already there. What do I do next? INT FA08. Let's say Ferguson is on port 8. Then I go switch port, access VLAN 10. Now I put another port in there. If I have a range of ports that I want to assign, I can use the command range and then put a range of ports in there. So the keyword is range. So you would type switch port, INT FA0, and then do a question mark, and you'll see range, and then it will show you how to select a range of ports to assign at one time rather than retyping this over and over again. Does this make sense? So you've now seen how to create the VLANs, why to create VLANs. That's more important to me, because the syntax, once you know why you're doing something, that concept, you should be able to go to a Cisco shop, a Jupiter shop, or whatever shop, and you should be able to manage their network. Make sure that you understand the concept, because if you're just memorizing syntax, God help you if you go from a Cisco shop to a Juniper shop, because you won't survive. That's why it's so important to me that you struggle through finding these commands, right? Because you should be in a Windows environment or in a Linux environment. If I tell you to configure DNS, you should be able to configure DNS for me. And that's what we do to you in 4.15. We tell you configure bind 9. And you come back and you just struggle. Well, yeah, you're supposed to struggle because now you're an employee. You don't go back to your boss and go, well, gee, I really don't know how to configure DNS. Well, shit. Excuse me. Well, that's not what I meant to say. I'm not at work. Well, really, you can't do that. Yeah, the truth comes out, right? That just came out like, I was going to say, let me finish my statement. I said, no shit, Sherlock. You can't configure it. You received a degree. What can you do then? Hey, make sure that you delete that off of this recording, please. Poker face. Did you hear me? Oh, make sure you delete my last 5 minutes off of here. No, it was just a bad word followed by just some more nonsense. Yeah, indeed, it does. Okay. So either statically creating a VLANs, assigning those ports to it, or then dynamically using a software to say, okay, I want the MAC addresses for these employees to be on a list to then be assigned to a particular VLAN. So you can do that dynamically. And that's based on a MAC address. And I think a lot of you with wireless networks right now know how to do MAC filtering, right? And hopefully you don't rely on that as a sole way of protecting your wireless network, but I know a lot of you do. So on a end-to-end campus-wide VLAN, what would you see? You would see accounting, engineering, and then various accounting people. Notice I have more than one switch that belong to accounting. Same here. For my psychology or English department, I have multiple switches that belong to then psychology or English departments, and they would have their respective switches so that their employees are connected to those. Okay? And then what we call this is we would create a VLAN trunk, remember? And then I have a gigabit uplink within the trunk ports. Because of the fact that I send more traffic on the trunk ports, I need to make sure that I give the highest speed port to the trunk. As a matter of fact, you can't even take a 10 base port and make it a trunk port. It needs to be at least a fast Ethernet, because a lot more traffic traverses that